Are you?
Where is it?
Top.
Oh, okay. Very good. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim. This interview is being conducted. It's August 29th, 2024. My name is Wayne Rozen. I'm the interviewer. The interviewee is Richard Comstock.
Hi.
Who's all the way up from Chautauqua, right?
Chappaqua.
Chappaqua. Chautauqua's in the other part of the state.
I was going to say it wrong, sorry.
So, Richard, how about some basic information on your name, where you live, that type of thing, so we can get a good introduction?
Well, my name, Richard Comstock. I lived a lot of places over my lifetime. My father was career military, and so we were posted to a number of different spots, to include Okinawa, Texas, New York, a couple of tours in New York. My father was the head of ROTC at Cornell University for 3 years, and then Vietnam, where he was the military attaché to the Republic of Vietnam from 58, 59, and 60. And then came back to the Pentagon after that and retired out of the Pentagon in the early 60s. And then we moved back to Ithaca, and that's where I finished high school and then went to college at St. Lawrence University in upstate New York, where I was fortunate enough to receive an ROTC scholarship, and then went into the Army, and of course comes with a cost, and that was 4 years on active duty. So I went in, and in 1969, after graduation, a month after graduation, I reported to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I was branch qualified in the field artillery. And after that, in late '69, I was assigned to Korea, the Republic of Korea, where things were starting to heat up. For those of you who study the history of things that went on over there, you know that the Pueblo was captured in '68, and there was a kind of a shift in terms of emphasis on what was going on in Korea, and there were some concerns. I don't know that for a fact, but I know that I got assigned to Korea and spent 13 months there, came back to the United States and spent a short period of time with 3 Corps Artillery, and then was granted a theater transfer and went to Vietnam, and spent, went to Vietnam in 1971, and I stayed through my first tour and extended for a second tour, which was cut short by the ceasefire in January of '73. And and then after the ceasefire, I stayed on in Vietnam as part of a commission to monitor the ceasefire. And then by the end of March of 1973, we were basically told, that's it. All combat troops had to leave, and were on the 30th of March of 1973. We left.
So let's go back for a second. In your youth, so the French were out of Vietnam at that point.
The French, in 1954, in July of '54, the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which was in the very northern quadrant of North Vietnam, very near the Laotian border. That defeat, that French defeat at Dien Bien Phu, kind of sealed the end game for the French. And the French, of course, came into Vietnam after World War II. There was some confusion as to who was in charge, and that's when the first sort of seeds of discontent, because the Vietnamese felt strongly that they should be an independent country, and the French felt strongly that they should reassert their authority in Vietnam for a number of reasons, not the least of which was Vietnam is a very resource-rich country. Just coffee, tea, rubber, oil, as it turns out, and it wasn't at that time, but there, and of course, South Vietnam in particular was the rice basket of Asia. It could produce per capita more rice than probably any other country
Now, at that point, Ho Chi Minh, throughout this whole thing, was a very serious player in all of this.
Ho Chi Minh was the fellow in 1945 when effectively the war in World War II ended and the Japanese were being sort of ushered out. Did what he could to assert himself and become the nationalist, and of course with communist leaning, assert himself to be the president, if you will, premier of a unified Vietnam, and that didn't go well with the French
or us.
And if you think about it, in the late 40s, Roosevelt had, at that point in time, Roosevelt had gone, and Roosevelt was a very strong proponent of independence for decolonization, much to the chagrin of people like Winston Churchill. But nonetheless, there was a hard drive by Minh and Ho Chi Minh and some of his cohorts to assert themselves, and they were, I would say, somewhat successful, but never quite as successful as they wanted to be in terms of unifying the country.
So basically, the table had been set when you guys were there.
And so, to get back to your original question, I'm sorry to digress.
No, this is good.
But to get back to your original question, in '58, I mean, we were 4 years past Dien Bien Phu. We were effectively 3 years past the if you will, the French influence rather than the rule. And I should say not but, and there was a significant increase in the amount of participation that the United States began to have in Vietnam, mostly through economic aid, or aid and I should say aid, both military and economic. Military aid came in the form of dollars. Economic aid came in the form of a somewhat convoluted adventure to subsidize a lot of goods, mostly consumables, that were shipped into Vietnam. And so when we got there, the era of French flavor, for the lack of a better word, American aid, and the stabilization of a South Vietnamese government, because after Dien Bien Phu, the Geneva Convention, which basically sealed the end, if you will, of the French influence, the Geneva Convention provided for the division of Vietnam into two separate legal, if you will, entities, and a gentleman by the name of Ngo Dinh Diem ended up being the premier. Bao Dai, who had been the emperor there, bowed out.
Bao Dai bowed out. Okay.
Bao Dai bowed out, and basically, what happened was Diem came into power, and of course Diem had his own challenges internally. He had a number of religious sects, a number of what they called bandits, that he had to basically tame, if you will, in order to be able to assert himself. But he, like Ho Chi Minh, was a nationalist. He was all for an independent Vietnam. So it's not an irony, but it's no surprise that both of them were absolutely driven by the notion that they wanted to be independent. The problem became when the U.S. became such a benefactor of the South. It was hard to turn off that spigot and say, okay, we don't need you any longer. We don't want your aid. We don't want to do anything. But if you look at history in the 50s, you'll know that during the Eisenhower administration, there was a significant amount of effort on the part of the United States to preclude any kind of communist leaning on many of the smaller nations around the globe. I mean, the two most classic examples are Iran and Guatemala, where the potential for a left-leaning government was sort of nipped in the bud by a number of means, not all.
Okay, let's not go into that to depth, okay?
Not all of which were on.
Yeah, but no, it's...
But my point being is that the aid was there to the South in order to be able to prop them up, in order to be able to give them hopefully the ability to be able to withstand an invasion, if you will. But you know, that's sort of the flavor. But it was a good time, because by 58, GM had stabilized the internal strife, and the country was benefiting from the economic aid.
And into this comes Richard Comstock. So Richard, why don't you, if you could point out this right now, I have your father's driver's license.
Yeah.
So.
If you look at this is my dad's driver's license. Obviously, I was not old enough to drive. This picture was taken a year or two before we came. These are my passport pictures. But this is a club membership, the very famous club in Saigon, where I played tennis virtually every day. This was my identification card. This was a national identification card, which was required to be on your person if you were asked for. This was my library card at the Abraham Lincoln Library in downtown Saigon. And this was my membership card for the Boy Scouts, troop number 1 and only.
Troop number 1,
troop
wow.
Number 1 and only troop in South Vietnam at the time. And I still have my uniform. Of course,
and you still have most of your hair too, Richard. So I commend you on that. That's great. Okay, so we kind of set the table. You went to St. Lawrence. You had a grandfather that served in the First World War.
Yes, and the Spanish-American. Yep. And
the Spanish-American War, which is really admirable. And then your father served in the Second World War. Yep, and
then of course after that stayed on in the military after the war.
So you coming out of St. Lawrence, did your family expect you to go into the service? Was that all left up to you, or that was kind of predetermined?
In the 60s, you know, it wasn't quite like it is today, where your kids, my kids, you know, did all their homework and they had a lot of online resources to figure out where they wanted to go, and they made their decisions. And when I was going to school, it was, you know, well, here are the places I think you really should go. You know. And not to digress, my dad was also an attorney, and he went to law school in Brooklyn Law School in downtown Brooklyn. Brooklyn Law School at the time, in 1929, when he graduated, Brooklyn Law School was part of St. Lawrence University. So, little known fact, and many people even up in Canton, New York, didn't know that, but my father's diploma from law school is from St. Lawrence University. So, so there was a natural fit there, and it made sense, and you know, the rest was history. We lived in Ithaca. I wasn't keen on staying in Ithaca because I knew if I went to Cornell, I would probably end up living at home, and I was ready to make that break. So
well, you made it.
Offered a wonderful, and for me, a very important transition to a community which I hadn't had all my life because we moved so frequently. I was never able to really solidify myself in a community. So St. Lawrence was a very important part of my world.
So you enlisted, you were drafted?
Well, the ROTC, I mean,
right.
We went into ROTC, so, and then I got the scholarship. So it was, you're just there. You took, in those days, ROTC was a course, like any other course, and you had tests, and you did your field exercises, and you worked that into your normal academic life. And then in the summer after my junior year, we all of us who were in what we called advanced ROTC, which meant you didn't do just 2 years of ROTC, you did 4 years of ROTC, went to summer camp, basic training, basically. And we were all taken to Indiantown Gap Military Reservation for basic training in the summer of '68.
And then you went to Fort Sill.
Went to Fort Sill and was branch qualified in the field artillery. I was 13 Alpha, which is field artillery, and then went and was given orders to Korea. As I said, there was a lot of reasons why Korea was chosen, but you could speculate as to what they were. But I ended up with the 7th Infantry Division in Korea, and because of my branch, I was assigned to an artillery battalion. Interestingly enough, an artillery battalion, the 1st Battalion of 31st Artillery, which was Honest John Rocket Battalion, which was the most interesting and unusual assignment. But we were a bunch of us young kids basically were firing section, assembly and transports, platoon leaders, and company commanders. So it was a young group. We did well. I mean, in terms of our field exercises and whatnot. It was an interesting experience. It was a difficult experience for me personally, but it was just one piece of the puzzle.
So you said it was a difficult experience for you personally. Can I ask what that meant?
Well, it's heartstring things, stupid things you do, and choices that you make that turned out not good.
Not good, but well thunk out at the time.
Yeah, I mean, and I regret some of those, but
Okay, no more than that.
You didn't want to lose,
So, but you did not speak Korean.
No.
And there's a big difference between Korean and Vietnamese?
Well, first of all, you can't read Korean. You and I can't look at something in Korean and have any clue as to what it is. I mean, I knew enough Korean to say hello, and I still can to my friend at the UPS who runs the UPS store. I can say hello and thank you, and how are you, and can do, and all that kind of stuff. But no, not in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, and after Korea?
After Korea, I came back to the United States. I asked for an intertheater transfer so I could go directly to Vietnam from Korea, and that the machinery was not working all that efficiently. So I ended up coming back to the States, spent a little bit of time with 3 Corps Artillery, and then was granted my transfer to
So what kind of artillery were you involved with?
In Vietnam? Or in
Korea and Vietnam.
Well, Korea was Honest John artillery. I mean, it was a rocket artillery. We had rocket launchers, and we launched very, very large rockets. And the Honest John system was kind of in its twilight. In other words, it wasn't going to survive much longer, but it had the cachet, I guess, for the lack of a better word, of being a nuclear capable organization. So that was, in and of itself, an asset, if you will, in the arsenal. And so our nuclear operations were probably our biggest challenge. It was just to make sure we understood how to fire, how to transport, how to arm, how to do everything, and including all the what they call NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical operations that are attended with nuclear operations. So it was, and inspections came from every level, because our chain of command, if you will, organizationally was 7th Division, I Corps, 8th Army, USARPAC, which was U.S. Army Pacific, and then DA. So we basically had inspections, technical inspections from every level of the Army over that year that I was.
And these inspections would be, you could be there and all of a sudden there'd be an inspection?
No, you were usually given,
you were ample notice.
At least 2 or 3 weeks notice that it was coming. And we, kind of, history did repeat itself to a certain extent, so we knew that, if we hadn't heard anything in a month or two, we knew something was coming. So, we didn't know where it was coming from, but we knew probably there was going to be something coming.
So then from the States you were transferred to Vietnam.
I went to Vietnam, and that's where it got more interesting, because I in processed it in Tan Son Nhut in Saigon, and we flew in. And of course, I mean, I knew where it was, you know, I mean, it wasn't like, you know, it was only 10 years before that I'd been in Vietnam. So in the replacement, you know, center that we were all housed in, you know, until you got your assignment, I asked the captain who was in charge of the replacement center, I said, look, I know this sounds odd, but let me tell you, I used to live here, and I would really like to go back and you know, take a peek. And I said, I have, my mother and father have some friends that I told Mom and Dad that I would try to see. And I said, could I get a day? I swear to you, you know, I'm not going AWOL, I'm not, you know, jumping the fence, but I would really like to do this. And he basically checked, and they gave me the pass. So I went and visited one of my mother and father's good friends, they were very friendly with. He was a colonel in the Vietnamese army. He had since died. He was assassinated, basically. Assassinated. And I visited his widow, and I got I got back into French in a hurry because she didn't really speak English all that well, so we had to converse in French. But it was sad, and you know, I just felt badly. She had sent her son. Her daughter was still there, but her son they had sent to France to get educated and possibly just to stay there, because they were so worried about, particularly the men, being, you know, targets. And so, but I had a really nice time with her, and it was just, you know, one of those things. So I wrote my parents a letter immediately and told them all about it.
So from when you left to when you returned, was there a great deal more infrastructure? Did everything have a more military flavor, or not really?
Oh yes, really. I mean, it was there. When I lived there, you know, you could smell the whitewash, the paint on the plaster. It was, you know, it was a smell that you became so familiar with that you just.
It's a great smell.
Yeah, it was a great smell. Yeah. And so, you know, there was a lot more brick, a lot more, you know, modern, and that was beginning at the time we left. I mean, the Caravel Hotel was built, and it was much more modern. It was, you know, kind of, you know, everybody was like, wow, this place is cool. But, you know, BOQs were springing up around town. I mean, and just the whole, you know, kind of GI, you know, are here kind of thing was, you know, made it different. It was a lot more crowded, a lot more bustling than it had been. It had been a little sleepier when, I mean, absolutely, the place was nuts with motorbikes, but there, it was much more so when I went back, a lot more.
Reflecting on this is 60-some years ago.
Yeah. Well, figure it this way, 50 years ago, 50 years ago last March 2023, I came back from Vietnam. 60 years ago, you know, 63 years ago, I was there. I mean, as a kid, going to school. And, you know, it was, you know, startling to me and somewhat saddening that, you know, that Vietnam was losing its charm.
It's wonderful world charm.
And you know, there was when we first got orders, my dad first came home and said, I got orders, we're going to Vietnam. We had to get out the atlas to figure out where we were going. And, you know, but it was, and my mother said, oh, I remember, Saigon is the pearl of the Orient. And indeed it was. I mean,
the pearl of the Orient.
It was. And it was a beautiful city. And you know what? I went back with my son 20 years ago, and it is a beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, really, it's a beautiful, beautiful city, and you know, I'm just glad there's peace.
Peace, right, right. So let's talk about you know, some of your experiences in Vietnam.
Okay.
You know, and I'll let you pick out the memories that are most vibrant to you.
Let me give you the high points and low points.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Basically, after Saigon, you you knew where you were going based on what they issued you. If they issued you a helmet, flak vest, or 2 flak vests in some cases, you knew you were going somewhere, you know, out there. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, because I didn't see any point in sitting in a, you know, in any U.S. compound, because I knew these people, so I really wanted to be back with them to a certain extent. And so I got shipped to Da Nang, and there was an advisory slot.
That was a huge Air Force base.
Well, there was Air Force there, there were Marines there, there was Army there. Da Nang was a town which I really didn't get to see at all. I mean, I stayed in this one area, you know, just a very small part of Da Nang, but I was just waiting orders to go to a unit, and I got the order I was assigned to the 33rd ARVN Artillery Battalion. And the 33rd was part of the 3rd Division, which was a division that was created late in the game that gave one of the generals a command. So I was an advisor along with 4 others in our advisory team that basically advised and trained the ARVN Artillery Battalion. Part of our training was deployment, and we would deploy to different fire bases and spend time, week, 2 weeks, whatever they were told to do.
Right.
We would go, and one of the deployments, which is significant, was a fire base called Alpha 2, and the history of the Alpha goes back to the late 60s, when the Alpha line was a series of fire bases along the DMZ, basically outlining the DMZ, not exactly, but sort of. Right. And the Alpha line, and then there was a Bravo line, and behind that a Charlie line, and those lines, by the time I was there, the fire bases on those lines were pretty much not in use, but the Alpha 2 was continued to be in use. One of the reasons was it was close to the main highway, which was QL1, so I could get my battalion, or my battalion commander, my counterpart could get his battalion up to Alpha 2, and we could deploy.
Like a 2-lane highway?
Yeah.
Dirt road? Gravel?
No, it was paved. I mean, okay. QL1 was paved. Okay. Once you get off QL1, no okay. Such pavement. But the significance of being on Alpha 2 on March 29th of 1972 was when we first started getting significant incoming from rockets and artillery on the fire base. Again, it was the only real fire base other than a couple of J.J. Carroll and a couple of others that were off closer to the Laotian border. And we were starting to take flak. Well, we also had, besides the 5 of us, and it became 4 of us because one of them rotated out.
Just 4 of you?
There was 4 Americans, and it ended up with 4 Americans. There had been 5 to start with, but one fellow's term was up, his ETS was up, or his DROS was up. So he left. And anyway, the bottom line was, between March 29th and March 31st, basically, the action intensified. And so the point where we all had basically come to the conclusion that we needed to do something, get out. And so my counterpart, the battalion commander, was very upset. He didn't want any Americans killed because that's a bad thing. So he said, well, you D, go. And so we started, they followed, and we went actually down close to Da Nang because there was no chain of command for us. the nearest, our nearest next up was down in Da Nang, not up there. We were kind of on our own, and we needed to know what we wanted us to do. So we went down there, we found out what was going on, then we came back and met our battalion commander back at a base camp in Quang Tri. And then from there, we deployed up to a river which was south of the DMZ, of which back to which we fell as the ARVN forces.
Right.
The bridge that, if you read about the Easter, it's called the Easter Offensive of '72. The bridge was actually blown, and in large part because of the actions of one captain, American, who got under the bridge and set the charges, and basically that's what stopped the tanks from coming across the river. And we were on the backside of the crest, facing the river, and we fired tremendous.
Well, it said here you were digging into the south side.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, does that mean actually digging in?
Yeah. Well, we were taking artillery too. So I mean, it was, we were just gun to gun, and so it was crazy. I mean, we dug foxholes, and it was to sort of give you a flavor. You learn at Fort Sill that when you take incoming, there's called crater analysis. So what you do is you take a spike like this and you stick it in the hole where the shell exploded, and that kind of gives you directionally where you think the thing came from. And then you look at the rings or any kind of shrapnel to look at how the shrapnel was formed when it came out of the tube, and that can give you kind of an idea of what the caliber of the weapon that was being fired at you. But in order to do that, you had to go out into the impact area. And my counterpart, I said, well, we're going to go do a crater analysis because we need to find out where these guns are coming from, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I said, well, let's go out and do this. He said, oh no. He said, you could do that at Fort Sill, but not here. I said, wrong. We're going to do it. So I went out. We got some directional intelligence. But the biggest problem we had was we had 105 howitzers, which had an effective range of 12,000 meters, maybe. We were firing up against 122 millimeter guns, 130 millimeter howitzers, which had ranges that were significantly greater than ours. So, we were kind of outgunned, which made it difficult. But the bottom line was that we finally we stayed there for a couple of weeks and just volleyed back and forth. They volleyed us, and the tanks were stopped on the other side. So we didn't have to fear for that, and there was no real river crossings per se by the infantry, at least into our area where we were. And so we finally got our orders that once there was a fire base called J.J. Carroll. Once J.J. Carroll was evacuated, the two advisors on J.J. Carroll, because the whole brigade that was there surrendered, and they had to extract these two majors. I think it was a major, captain, or two majors, to extract them from J.J. Carroll. And anyway, we got the word that all American advisors at any kind of level below division, done, you're finished. Not going to happen. And we so rounded us all back up. We went back to our base camp in Quang Tri, got our stuff, and headed down to Da Nang for reassignment. And,
so, does fear work into this equation at all?
I'm sorry?
Does fear work into this equation? Did you wake up every day thinking about this kind of stuff?
I remember, the thing I remember was vividly is us trying to make the decision as to what to do, because we had no higher headquarters that was in touch with us. My understanding is once the offensive started, that, and again, this is only, I'm not saying this is gospel, but there was a significant amount of confusion in the higher ups in the advisory business in Da Nang, and so we were, I remember wondering, what,
what's going on?
As the old song, do I stay or do I go? I don't know, and so we decided to sort of split the baby and sort of stay, and then get them to start moving back, so we all felt comfortable about not just, you know, leaving.
Well, when you said the analysis of where the howitzer or where the shot would come in, you realized you were outgunned.
Yeah, oh yeah, there was no question. And as a practical matter, we knew that when we were on the fire base, because we knew that we just couldn't range the
you couldn't outdo them.
The only thing that what was the artillery was particularly effective. Ours were ground troops and or tanks. You know, if you could neutralize a tank, and that's also a challenge. But you know,
you had mentioned here a person you'll always remember from your service, Colonel Hawkins.
Oh, Colonel Hawkins. He once told me that this is great, and I use this. I did
it's
some
very interesting. I like it. What?
I use it a lot. And Hawkins said to me one time, because I asked him about something he decided he was going to do, and I said, "Sir," he said, "you know, I'm not sure." He goes, "Captain, a poor plan vigorously executed will work."
In spite of all its faults, if you proceed,
I sort of felt at that point in time that I okay, you know,
you go at it with gusto and it'll work.
Checkmate. You know, you got me. I don't know what else to say.
That was very funny. Yeah, because that's true in just about everything we seem to do.
Yeah, so then I went down. Then I was reassigned to 4 Corps, and just for your information, Vietnam divided into 4 corps. I Corps, which was the northernmost sector, 2 Corps, which was basically the mountains, where in the central of South Vietnam, 3 Corps, which was the Saigon, the environs around Saigon. Saigon had its own capital district, and then there was 4 Corps, which was down in the rice basket of Vietnam, down in the Delta. The Delta was flat as a pancake, connected. Most of the traffic in the Delta was by canal, and the canals connected places. And I spent a little bit of time in Canto, where there was a big Army airfield, and I spent some time there, and then was assigned to be a district advisor in a district in Ba Xuan province, and there I was with 5 Americans, and we were on a fire base outside of a little town called Vinh Quoy, and
so it sounds like you were interrogating also.
Well, one of my jobs was technically to manage the Phoenix program, which was a very controversial program that was developed in the mid to late 60s. And it was designed to ferret out VCI, Viet Cong infrastructure. And it was a bit of investigation. It was a bit of using people who knew people to find out where bad guys were, or to hear about them. And once you targeted an individual, you had 3 choices. One, you obviously wanted to rally them. If that didn't work, you wanted to capture them. And if that didn't work, obviously the last thing was, you neutralize them.
Yeah.
And but the Phoenix program at that time was on kind of its last legs, and so we kind of, it was a law of diminishing returns. We were getting less out of it. The benefit, interestingly enough, and I want to add this because I don't want to run out of time, and this is important. One of the benefits I had down there was, believe it or not, there were particularly older gentlemen down there who spoke French.
French, yeah.
And they were very interested in communicating with me. And I had a couple of guys, one fellow in particular, who, a wonderful man, just classic Asian with a little beard and white hair, just great guy. And he would come down, and I'd make sure we had something, Coke or something for him. And he'd come down, he just wanted to talk French. That's all he wanted to do. And then I had another fellow who was a friend. He became a friend. I mean, we knew each other. We'd see each other, and, you know, go out in the field on operation or something. Like, hopefully, I'd see him when I go by. Anyway, he would, and he wanted to speak French. And you know, I quizzed him a lot about, you know, why. And he said, you know, you know, we don't want to be a French colony, but they did give us something that you know, is lasting, and it gave us a, you know, a framework that was important, and he, you know, he was, you know, again, never say, oh, I wish we were still under French rule, because nobody.
But give them credit for a lot of the cultural stuff.
Yeah, the French did a miserable job of training Vietnamese in terms of, you know, taking over governmental functions. They weren't terribly good about that. But by the same token, they did give them something that they could be proud of, is probably an overstatement, but just have.
Yeah, hold on to.
Yeah, have in their pocket.
Can we take sure. A quick look at these, and you can.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Point them out.
After the ceasefire, I was a district advisor. After the ceasefire, I was assigned, and again, I think partially because of the language, I was assigned to the Four-Power Joint Military Commission, which under the terms of the ceasefire was established to monitor the ceasefire, report ceasefire violations, investigate fault, if you will, and report up to a commission in Saigon composed of North Vietnam, the Viet Cong, the Americans, and the South Vietnamese, and they would manage this. Well, it worked at the lower levels, but it didn't work in Saigon because they could never get past the procedural, you know, issues. So we did a lot of reporting. I still have some of the reports that I wrote by hand and we had typed up. But we were back now in the province headquarters in Soc Trang, where things were, you know, a little more genteel. But basically, this was my ID card. So when we went out into the field, right, as part of a team, and usually there was myself and one or two field grade officers and one or two enlisted NCOs. And we'd go out, and then I'd come back and I'd write up the report, and then you know, I'd give it to my commander, and he would approve, and then we'd send it up. And then that's from the Four-Power. When I was a district advisor in 4 Corps, this was a 4 Corps patch that I wore on my, and this is the Bas Nguyen province, and then this is the 33rd ARVN Artillery Battalion, and I wore that patch up north when I was advising them.
You probably don't see too many of these patches around.
No, you don't. No. But you wore them on the pocket of your lapel. And this was the patch that represented the RF and PF. So when I was down in 4 Corps, I was not only a 4 Corps district advisor, I was also an RFPF, because there was a brigade of infantry down there, the RFPF infantry. So cool. I was also an infantry advisor. At that point in time, my MOS shifted. I was still, my primary MOS was artillery, but my duty MOS was infantry.
So when you came back from Vietnam, you got involved in the National Guard.
I got out of the Army.
Now, is there any more you want to spend on in Vietnam? I mean, you know, you spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't. You know, I mean, no. Let's get to because your time is.
Well, no, time is we can always put another tape in.
Okay.
So.
No, I think that I did go. I went back to Saigon. I had an opportunity to go to an advisory conference in Saigon during my tour, and I did spend another period of time where I did get to go and see, you know, friends and people that I knew, which was really important, and I think they appreciated it as well. But no, I think we're, you know, I think I'm trying to think of anything else. I mean, if you go back to when I was a kid, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happened. I mean, I don't want to put this out of sequence, so, but you know, but life, which I didn't get to in Saigon when I was a kid, was good.
Vietnam today is a very popular tourist spot.
Yeah, I had, interestingly enough, well, we'll go. I got out of the Army.
Right.
I got. I basically went back to Ithaca, lived with my parents.
Right.
I was kind of lost. I really didn't know. You know, it was difficult. I had lost a lot of, you know, I had some personal losses early on, and I kind of looked at all this and I said, you know what? I just, there's no war, there's no conflict. I'm going to be sitting at some post and who knows where, and I really don't want to do that. So I got out. And my father, who I credit my father with helping me through this all, because he basically said to me, look, he said, don't rush to do anything. Just do, you know, whatever you're doing. Cutting down trees, which is what I ended up doing for, you know, a year and then plus. But in that interim time, I realized that I needed to have something other than the military and a history degree from St. Lawrence University to go forward. I needed something, and I was advised by, my uncle was friends with a fellow who ran Chase Manhattan Bank, was president, and so I got an interview with Chase Manhattan. Well, long story short, didn't matter because I didn't get the job, but I got the best piece of advice I ever had, and that is a young lady who was my interviewee basically said, look, what you need to do if you want to pursue this, you need to find some schooling, get some technical schooling, go to a graduate school that has accounting and some other course, take a couple of courses. If you do well, I'm sure you can go for whatever degree you want, whether it's a master's degree or an MBA or whatever. And I did. I went up to Cornell and I took 2 courses. I did well, and I did well in my GMATs, and I went to Cornell and got my MBA. So as part of going to school, I needed money. And the GI Bill wasn't particularly robust at that time, for the lack of a better word. And so I needed money. I said, well, what can I do that I know, like what kind of job can I have besides cutting down trees that I can do that I could, you know, wouldn't interfere with my schoolwork, would give me something to do during the summer.
Right.
And that I knew how to do. I said, well, this is a layup. I'll just go back and so I went up to Rochester, which was the nearest National Guard installation. And I said, you know, threw myself at them and I said, would you? And they, oh yeah, absolutely, because you have active duty experience, you artillery, blah, 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 blah. And I was put into the 209th Field Artillery Brigade, but didn't stay there that long because they wanted me at the battalion level, which was a, you know, more hands-on, you know, with the guns and whatnot. And so I went to that, first to the 209th, still in Rochester. So I would commute back, you know, on the weekends, when my one weekend a month, I would commute from Ithaca to Rochester, and then by 2 weeks in the summer.
Let's go back 1 second. When you came back from Vietnam, did you come back with any psychological baggage?
I was depressed. I mean, and I was depressed for the reasons that everything sort of accumulated at that point in time. The mistakes I had made personally in my life, the fact that Vietnam appeared to be a losing game at that point, and I don't mean it lightly. I mean, we did not look good. When we left in '73, the writing was on the wall. I mean, you know, the North Vietnamese at VC, if you want, but the other side had been given too much territory as a result of as a result of the truce,
Right.
if you will, the agreement, and it was only a matter of time, and it was sad, because I think the thing that troubled me the most was they were my friends, and they had this feeling that all we needed to do, they obviously were sad as a friend to see me go, the people that I knew, but particularly the young military folks believed that as long as we were there with F-4 Phantoms and we had, carrier-based, A4s or whatever, that everything was going to be fine. Because we could just blow them out, and B-52s coming from, Guam or wherever, Okinawa or wherever, Thailand, Udorn or whatever, everything would be fine. Which was a mistake. I mean, it was just a mistake, because you knew, I knew, and I didn't know, but I sensed that there was going to be an end game where we were going to say, we as a country were going to say, wait a second, we can't do this anymore. And we gotta.
Like Afghanistan.
Yeah, and we gotta go. I mean, you can't just keep, shoveling good money after bad if there's not, if it just looks, if the odds are so bad. If your odds are terrible, you're not going to bet on a nag, right? You put it in Saratoga terms, and so you just, it was hard. It was really hard.
Did you go to therapy at all?
No, I didn't.
You never did. Okay.
I mean, put yourself back in those days. You're not as old as I am, but
I think I'm older than you are. How old are you?
I don't want to tell you. I can't.
Well, I'm 82.
No.
I am.
Really?
Yeah. Born 42.
Well, then I'm 76.
So there you go. You're a youngster. Okay. Yeah. No. Yes.
Oh my God. You're an inspiration.
Yeah, I'm 82.
Oh my God.
I just had a hip done.
That's
5 weeks ago.
Crazy.
Yeah.
You look great.
Yeah, I feel good.
Holy smokes. Well, tell me about yourself.
Well, no, but you're similar.
But you know what?
I know.
You know what?
But we stay active.
Yeah.
We're invested in things.
Look, you didn't go on TV and see better help. Go call a therapist. It wasn't something that manly men did. I mean, you didn't go to therapy. But the best therapy I had were parents who understood, and I couldn't have asked for more.
I went to therapy. Started going to therapy probably in my 40s.
Really?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I found it extremely rewarding.
Wow.
But it was painful.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Absolutely.
So where are we here?
Are you done?
Well, he just got done telling me about how old he was, etc. No, yes, I don't know if we're done. We're.
Well, I mean, you wanted to hear more. I was going to tell you.
In other words, we can keep on going here if you want, another 15, 20 minutes or something like that. It's up to you.
Well, I'll tell you the rest. Okay?
Yeah.
So I went to Cornell and I got my MBA, and I ended up getting a job with Arthur Anderson, which was a public accounting firm. And I stayed with Anderson, and I juggled the Army, because by the time I went to Anderson, I had already now had 4 years active plus 2.5, almost 3 years. So I now had 7 years in. Whoa, if I can, parlay this into, do this and manage Anderson at the same time, which was very demanding. And I did. So I stayed. I made partner at Anderson, and in 1990, I got my 20-year letter. I said, because I had to have, I had to have some relief. By that time I was a partner. I was asked to do a lot of extra things. And my life was not as compartmentalized as it was when I was a staff or a senior. So it was more. Anyway, the story I wanted to tell you.
I'm just going to pause.
Okay.
As part of Anderson, I was, like I said, I did, it came to their attention that I had Vietnam experience. Well, obviously it came to their attention. They knew because of it. But as things evolved through the years, there were more opportunities to interface with Vietnamese, and I had two which I thought were particularly important. One, I was a member of the Asia Society, which the firm wanted me to be part of. So I went to a lot of their functions, and I went to one luncheon where there were Vietnamese, governmental people there, and I sat next to one of the big cheeses in the government, and I told them, I didn't tell them so much about my war experience. I told them more about my kid experience.
Yeah, right.
And I said, look, I said, I just hope that if you, and we were talking about opening Vietnam back up, and the fact of the matter, he said to me, look, I'm going to tell you right now, and he didn't say it in quite those terms, he said, I will tell you, the Soviet experiment did not work. He was very clear about that. And I said, well, I could have told you, but no, but the fact of the matter is that it wouldn't work, and that's, it could work, sure, but I didn't think it would be all that helpful. Anyway, but I said, you know what, I said, if you open the country back up, what scares me is that it will lose its charm.
Yeah. The pearl of it.
Yeah. You can resurrect, you can rebuild, you can retool Saigon or Hanoi or wherever to be those to have it that feel that it had in the 30s, in the 40s, and in the 50s. But the 60s destroyed a lot of that, right, because of our influence. And he said, don't you worry. Literally, he said, don't worry. We will never let that happen. I said, I pray that you're right about that. And it was very meaningful to me. I'll never forget it in terms of an experience. The second experience I had was the U.S. Information Service called me up one day and said, we understand that you have experience in Vietnam. We have a group coming over that wants to learn about finance in the United States, and they're Vietnamese. There's 5 of them, and would you be willing to take them around for part of the day and kind of give them an idea of what you do and maybe take them to lunch? I said, sure, can do. And so I met them.
This is as a partner at Anderson.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay.
And so I met them at our offices. They were chauffeured up to 6th Avenue, and delegation, older gentlemen, in between gentlemen, and 3 young kids. And so the 3 young ones really didn't speak English at all. They spoke Russian and they spoke Vietnamese, okay, right? The middle guy spoke French and some English, but not a whole lot. And the older men, I wasn't sure exactly how to read him. So I decided I was going to use my best Vietnamese to tell him, by the way, I nói tiếng Viet, and I speak Vietnamese. And he looked at me with those eyes that I just love. Yeah. And he said, do you speak French? And I said, yes. We'll speak French. And I don't know whether that was a commentary on how lousy my Vietnamese was, or whether he just wanted to speak French. But it goes back to it connects the dots between the old man who used to come and talk in French, and this older man who wanted to speak French. He could have spoken English,
but he wanted to speak French.
Yeah. And
so do they still speak French over there?
Yeah, but mostly the older ones.
The older ones.
Yeah. The younger ones speak American. Speak English. Because of the influence. Right. But I don't think I did not experience any Vietnamese speaking Russian, but I did.
Yeah, that kind of came out of left field when you said that.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
the whole Soviet experiment didn't work. That was
Yeah.
Different for me, okay.
Well, that's what he told me. And so anyway, but you know, fast forward. That was one of the other things I wanted to get in. The other thing is that in 2002, my son was a junior, I guess it was. Yeah, junior at University of Michigan.
Right.
But he did a semester abroad in Australia. So he called me and he said, "Dad, you going to come over?" And I said, "Oh yeah, of course." Yeah. So he said, "What do you want to do when you get there?" I said, "Well, I have no idea. I've never been to Australia before." And he said, "Well, we can go here, we can go there." I said, well, "Hey, we could even go to Saigon."
Yeah, I was waiting for that. Okay,
and he goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, here are the ground rules." I said, "I don't really want to go to any place that I was in the military, but I want to go to the places that my mom and dad and I went to, or friends, me and my friends went to." And so, and the other condition is we stay at the same hotel that my mom and dad and I stayed at when we first got there.
Are you still there?
Oh yeah. And so we had a suite at the corner of the hotel, the Hotel Majestic, and beautiful old French hotel. Beautiful. This is what makes.
I know, because the French keep surfacing in all your stories.
Yeah.
It's really.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And they were, to me, they were very important people. But anyway, so we had a nice suite. So I said to Richard, I said, my son's name's Richard too, and my father's name is Richard too. My grandson's name is Richard too. Anyway, it was. But,
no Dicks, a lot of Richards. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So anyway, he said, "Fine, I'm going to take care of it." And so I booked the flights out of Australia because I went to Australia first, and then we flew from there. And he booked the hotels. So I started, I had to get a visa, right, to go to Vietnam. And this was like Saturday or Sunday. We cooked this thing up, and I was going to leave on Saturday. We cooked this thing up on Saturday. I called him on Tuesday. He said, "Everything is looking really good. And I got the hotel, we got this, we got that. I even got a car." So I said, "This is great. All I'd have to do is get the visa." So I went down to this place in New York City, in the old Pan Am building that facilitates visas. And I said, "We can't do a Vietnamese visa. You have to go to Washington to get this visa." So I called the Vietnamese embassy in Washington. I said, "I need to get a visa for Saturday." This was like Monday or Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, we can't do it that quickly."
Yeah, I was waiting for that. I can't believe it. Okay.
I said, I called Richard on Tuesday or Wednesday. Here I am getting ready to leave on Saturday. I called him on Tuesday or Wednesday. I said, "We're going to have to call this show off because I can come to Australia, but we can't get to Vietnam." He goes, "Why?" I said, "I can't get a visa. These guys won't give me a visa in time." He goes, "Oh, that's so sad, So he calls me back the next day.
Yeah.
And he says,
"This is Richard's calling."
Yeah. He says, "We're on." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I found a guy at the consulate in Sydney, and when you get there, because I live on Saturday, I get there Sunday, right? Because the day different. Anyway, and he said, when you get there, we have to go directly to the consulate. We need to have $100, and this guy's going to give you a visa." So here we are.
I love that. Okay.
And so we end up going, to the. I mean, this is 22 years ago, right? And so we end up going by. He had a little car that he had rented.
I'm looking for a picture. I'm hearing everything you're saying.
And so we go to the place. This Vietnamese gentleman comes out, takes my passport, comes back, slaps the visa into the passport. We're done. We're off the next day to Saigon. It
shows you how things can be done.
We ended up at the Hotel Majestic, 2 doors down from the suite that my parents and I stayed in.
It probably felt great.
It was gorgeous, wonderful, terrific, unbelievable. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I had a picture of my wife and I on the Sydney Bridge.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
We did that
Yep.
bridge thing,
Yep.
which was, it was a wonderful picture. Well, it's here somewhere, but whatever.
I basically have not a lot of recollection of Sydney, only because we ended up not spending a lot of time there. But
No, you want,
downtown was.
I knew you were going to go to Vietnam. I mean, there was no way
Downtown
you
was-
could tell the story without that not happening.
Yeah, well, this didn't go over well with my daughter, who now has, I have promised her we're going to Vietnam next year. So, and she's going to take the whole crew, all my grandchildren.
So where do they live?
My daughter lives in California, and my son lives in Maryland. My son's a doctor in Maryland, and my daughter's a mother, but when she gets through mothering, she's also a lawyer. So
Oh wow, that's great.
Yeah. I've got, my dad was a lawyer, my grandfather was a doctor, I was just a bean counter, but I got kids, one set, doctor and doctor married doctor, and lawyer married lawyer.
That's great.
So all the professional genes got all transferred.
Yeah,
down
but you know
to
something,
my
Richard,
kids.
your story fits together so beautifully with this
Yeah.
starting
Yeah.
and how the French weave through the whole thing
Yeah.
and how important it is over there.
And the other thing I might point out is my father and mother were very friendly with the French ambassador to Vietnam, and he was very good to us. We would go to, he had a villa in Dalat. Dalat was a city, town, whatever you want, in the mountains north and a bit east of Saigon. And Dalat was a very desirable place to go because it was so cool. It was much cooler and drier. And, it was great.
Yeah.
But he would let us use his villa, and I still remember it. It was it looked like this old dark hunting lodge, and it was so cool. But anyway, we would go in, and he was very kind to us, and a wonderful man who made history literally when he tried to negotiate with Diem when Diem was first thinking about, this is the president who was assassinated, was first thinking about possibly trying to contact Ho Chi Minh and see what they could do in terms of coming to some sort of a reconciliation, which scared the bejesus out of the U.S. But nonetheless, Ambassador Lalouette was very intimately involved in that. But one of my close friends when I was a kid was a guy named John Colby, and John's father was Bill Colby, who was the CIA director. He was actually station chief for a while in Saigon. And I've seen John. I haven't seen John in a long time, but he was a good friend and good person. And,
Interesting life, Richard. I mean, I'd love, it's almost like you could see, I could very easily see a movie out of this. It's the way it ties everything together, and sitting with the old wise men from Vietnam, starting in French and ending in French. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Tell you one more story.
Yeah.
After Anderson folded, we all got on the Ark and tried to find a new home. And
I had a brother-in-law who was with Laventhal and Horwath, and they folded also.
Oh yeah. I heard that was a tough one for them. They were in the hospitality business a lot. They did a lot of hospitality audits. Anyway, I went to Deloitte, and I went direct as a partner at MIT. So I was a partner, as many of us from Anderson did, went to Deloitte. And one of my clients came from Anderson with me to Deloitte, a wonderful organization called Continental Grain. And they were probably the most generous, decent people I've ever had as clients. And I still am in touch with a number of them, the chairman and the co-chairman, vice chairman, I should say. But anyway, long story short, we helped them with some really messy issues, IRS issues, and we did some really creative tax planning for them. I was a tax partner. And one of their board members was Henry Kissinger. So when I got ready to retire from Deloitte, the chairman of which is a family business, and he said, I'd like you to make a presentation to the board about all the things you've done over the past 10 years for our company. And I think the board needs to know what you've done for us. And I was honored.
Yeah.
And of course, Henry was on the board, and I had spoken to Henry in board meetings when he had asked me about this stuff, Comstock, and so anyway, but I had his
very good, Richard.
I had this 3-volume series of the White House years and
right.
subsequent, and so I said to the chairman's EA, I said, Susan, do you think that it's possible that I could get Henry, Dr. Kissinger, to sign just this 1 volume? And she, give me the book. And I said, okay. So we did the presentation. I went back because I had an office. They actually gave me an office the chairman said to me, I know it must be hard with Anderson Folding. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, it's like, bring your stuff here and you'll always have an office in our building. And I did forever. Anyway, so I got a call from her, and she said, Dr. Kissinger is waiting for you in the conference room. So I said, oh my gosh. So I'm like, I'm like, the cowardly lion in front of Oz, I don't know where they are.
Yeah, right.
So anyway, he's sitting there, he looks at me, he's got the book, and he goes, Joe DiMaggio gets $75 for signing his autograph.
Is that what he said?
He did.
I love it.
He did.
I love it.
And I swear to you, that's exactly what he said. And I was like, I said, I have $75. He goes, so I said, well, look I said,
That's very funny, Joe. Because Joe DiMaggio, you pay everything. Joe, that's a whole different story. Okay, go on, yeah.
So, so we got to, so I said, I said, you're a very important part of my life. I mean, you were there, when I was there. You were in the thick of things when I was there. And, the 4-Power Joint Military Commission was part of what and I was on that. And he goes, so where were you? So, half an hour later, we're still yakking about where we were. And I said, well, the Alpha line, we're in Alpha 2. He goes, oh, the McNamara lines. Oh, yeah, right off Q01, right? Yeah, right off Q01. Yeah. And, I mean, this was, 10, 12 years ago. He was a force. I mean, and he was at that point a slow-moving vehicle, but he was a smart guy. Yeah. I mean, he was the smartest guy in the room. I mean, without a doubt. He's just a very, very, and to me, I mean, I was on cloud 9. I mean, this guy let me talk to him for over half an hour.
Yeah.
I mean,
cool.
You don't get any better than that. I mean, it just doesn't get any better.
Always have that.
But he knew exactly. I mean, I told him about, I was down in 4 Corps, down, sock train, Boston province, right?
So my ex-brother-in-law was with Laventhal.
Yeah.
And he married my sister, and then they got divorced, all that. But he said, how's business? I said, sales are terrific. He said, let's put that aside. How are collections?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He says, because the sale doesn't mean anything until it's collected. Yeah. And I felt, gee whiz, but he is so right.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
It was so Howard collections. Yeah. Well, that is good.
Well, it's a three-part problem. You have inventory, which is your accumulated time. You have billing, which is getting the inventory into a bill that you can present to a client, and the third is collecting it.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you have to manage the accumulation, you have to manage the bill, and then you have to manage the collection. It's crazy. Anyway, but that's not happening. The last thing I would like to say, if I can.
Sure.
We didn't talk a lot about National Guard, other than I went to the 1st and 209.
Right.
But at that point, I was working at and I think this is important to weave into the discussion, because this is probably one of the things I'm proud of. Of the things that I'm proud of, is one of the things I'm proud of in my military background. I was living in New York City and going to Rochester for drills, which was a challenge.
This is where the Bronx comes in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And so it was known that I was doing this. And so the division commander of the 42nd down in New York, a guy named Vince Lana, really cool guy.
Yeah.
And Vince said, General Lana said, Comstock belongs in New York City. We have some real issues down here, and we need somebody who knows field artillery. So he calls me in the 14th Street Armory, and we talk, and he says, I'm going to assign you to the worst battalion that I might.
The worst battalion in my division.
And I said, really? And it was the 258th Field Artillery out of Kingsbridge Road in the Bronx,
yeah.
Which turned out to be the best battalion in the division. I had some significant challenges, but I also found that these kids, if you properly treat them, will do anything for you. And I'm so proud of them to this day, that it was an incredible story. We were nuclear capable.
And what year was this?
Well, the time I was with them was from 84 through 90.
Okay, the Bronx had started.
Oh yeah, yeah, it was a challenge. But these kids needed to know that you were there for them.
Yeah.
And that, before you would accuse them of anything, you would find out, what this real story was. I had my challenges. I mean, they did some really dumb stuff, but they, I had one guy up at Fort Drum go out to get pizza in a 5-ton truck with 50 caliber machine guns in the back. Not the smartest move, right? And this guy was an E7, right? But the fact of the matter was that these kids worked their butts off for me, and I'm so proud of them and what they did. It was really, for me, I couldn't have gone out in any better way. The 258's history was that their lineage started from the inauguration of George Washington.
Wow.
In 1789. In 1989, I led the 258th Field Artillery in a parade to celebrate the 200th anniversary of Washington's inauguration. That was kind of cool. But anyway, those are the pieces the nuggets that you can splice or do whatever you want. But I think that's important, because I think.
No, I don't think they're going to splice any of this. I think they're going to do the whole thing.
Well, I think the important part about the National Guard is that the National Guard's a real deal. It can be a real deal, and it sometimes doesn't get the respect in those days that I believe that it deserved. And I feel that I'm proud of every minute I served, but I'm most proud of my time overseas in active duty and my time with the 258th Field Artillery in the Bronx. And those are things that make me proud.
Well, I'm going to get Jim back up here. This was great. This is 10:30, well, an hour and a half. Yeah,
I didn't quite make the 4 hours, but
yeah, but 4 hours, it's like an economics lecture.
Okay.
You can.
So if your tape's still running, I'll show you a couple of other things.
Yeah.
That's my high school yearbook, or our school yearbook, I should say.
Hey,
Okay, Jim. Anytime.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. Bye-bye.
That's our school yearbook.
Oh wow. American Community School. Arlene Zucker. Who was she?
Oh, I mean, I remember her, but I don't. So here are the seniors. You ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And these guys were all in Saigon with you?
Yeah. Yeah, I know them all.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Ricky.
Yeah.
I think that's so great. No, hey, listen, I've been called a lot of stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, just call me anything but late for dinner.
Yeah.
Before we went to Vietnam, we spent time in Monterey, California, the Army Language School, and that was one of the texts from that. I just brought the smallest one, but I have a bunch of the old texts from.
Wow.